My name is Victoria. I am 29 years old, living in Chicago and working in senior financial consulting. People often call me the one who never breaks, never complains, never says no. It used to sound like a compliment. Now I am not so sure. In my family, steadiness means responsibility. It means being the quiet fixer, the emotional cushion, the last line of defense when things fall apart. I was the one who covered my younger brother's college tuition when he lost his scholarship for skipping too many classes. I was the one who took on my mother's mounting credit card bills, even though she never once asked how I was managing my own. And when my father's so-called business ventures started collapsing, guess who quietly took out a personal loan to keep the lights on at their house? That house, by the way, the one I helped pay for but never got to call mine. Growing up, I believed that family meant unconditional support, that no matter what, you show up, you give, you fix, you hold it together. But somewhere along the way, I started to wonder when exactly I had stopped being a daughter and started becoming an insurance policy. Most days, I push those questions aside. I bury myself in work. I keep the spreadsheets balanced, the clients happy, and my mind just busy enough to avoid thinking too deeply about the personal ledger that never seems to close. But last Thursday evening, something shifted. It came in the form of a text from my mother, just one sentence, no emojis, no explanations. "Dear Victoria, come by the house at 6 tonight. We have something special for you." I stared at the message longer than I should have. The words felt rehearsed, almost formal. Something special from my mother usually meant one thing: trouble dressed up as sentiment. The last time she used those words, I ended up co-signing a loan I never agreed to. I sat there in my apartment, phone still glowing in my hand, the evening sun slipping through the blinds. I should have ignored it. I should have said no. But I didn't. I never do. Instead, I stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked toward the door, unaware that this night would mark the beginning of everything unraveling. The drive out to the suburbs always felt longer than it should have. Maybe it was the weight of memory, or maybe it was just traffic. Either way, by the time I turned onto my parents' street, the sky had shifted into that deep, early evening blue, and the street lamps had just begun to flicker on. I parked in front of the house, a familiar two-story colonial with shutters I helped replace and a roof I helped fund. The house was tidy, warm-looking, glowing from within like something out of a brochure. It had been 4 years since I helped them refinance it. Of course, it was still in their names. I sat in the car for a few more seconds, hands resting on the steering wheel. The words from the text were still circling in my head. Something special. My stomach churned. I had no reason to expect anything other than the usual disappointment, but I stepped out anyway, because that is what I do. I rang the doorbell. It opened almost instantly. "Surprise!" my mother squealed, pulling me in with both arms like we had not spoken on the phone just 3 days ago. Her makeup was flawless, the kind of effort she only put in for company or appearances. Her lipstick was a bold red, her eyes wide and glinting too much. She looked excited, but it was the kind of excitement that had something behind it, something careful. "Happy early birthday, Victoria!" everyone shouted from the living room. I blinked. The room was full. Cousins, aunts, people I had not seen in years. My Uncle Garrett, my dad's sister Helen. Even Josh was there, leaning against the fireplace with a drink in hand. He gave me a nod, not quite a smile. "Oh, wow, you really got me," I said. I tried to smile. It did not reach my eyes. My mother ushered me toward the couch. "Sit, sweetheart. Just sit. Look at all of us together." My father appeared with a drink, the glass already sweating in his hand. "Your favorite," he said with a grin. "Green apple gin." I had not liked that drink in almost 4 years, but of course, no one had asked. I took the glass politely and sat down. That was when I saw it. On the side table next to the couch, laid neatly like it was part of the decor, sat a leather-bound folder. It was thick, tidy, intentional. "What is that?" I asked, already knowing the answer in my gut. "Oh, just boring paperwork," my mother said too quickly. She reached out to place a hand on mine. "Nothing important. Not tonight." I picked up the folder anyway. My fingers moved before my brain did. The top page was crisp. The title read clearly: Asset Reallocation Agreement. Underneath, In bold text was a sentence that made my blood freeze. I, Victoria Jane Prescott, hereby relinquish all claims to the Margaret Ellis Living Trust. I looked up, my voice still calm. What is this? My mother gave a tight smile. It is just a formality, tax-related mostly. You know how complicated estates can be. I flipped another page. There were attachments, temporary power of attorney, redistribution clauses, a full restructure of my grandmother's estate, everything redirected into a new trust, one managed entirely by my parents. Josh stepped forward. Just sign it, Vic. Everyone else already has. This is the easiest way to make it work for everyone. Everyone, I repeated. You mean you, and Mom, and Dad. My father tried to toast again, to Victoria, the brightest star of the family. I ignored him. I set the drink down on the coffee table and stood up. So this is why you called it a surprise. Not to celebrate, but to corner me. My mother's voice shifted, lower, firmer. Victoria, do not make a scene. This is not the time. I laughed, but it came out dry. If you wanted a quiet signature, you should not have dressed it up like a party. You invited the audience, not me. The room had gone quiet. Even the background music had stopped, or maybe someone turned it off. Either way, no one was talking. My eyes moved from face to face. All the familiar people suddenly looked like strangers. Some stared at the floor. Some checked their phones. No one spoke up. I closed the folder slowly and held it in my hands. I looked at my mother. This is not a request, is it? This is a script, and you expected me to play the part. She took a step toward me. Please, Victoria, be reasonable. But I was done being reasonable. I tucked the folder under my arm and turned toward the door. If this is how you define family, I think I need to start redefining what that word means to me. And I walked out into the cold night air, not knowing exactly what I would do next, but certain that I would not go back to the version of myself who once would have signed without question. The next morning, I sat across from Riley at a quiet lakeside cafe just north of downtown. It was the kind of place we used to go when we were both fresh out of college, too broke to afford the nicer spots but too proud to stay home. Now it felt like neutral ground, somewhere far enough from my parents' house, far enough from my apartment, and just quiet enough to think. Riley pushed a steaming mug of tea toward me as I unfolded the leather-bound folder again. I had barely slept, replaying every word from the night before like a broken loop. Their faces, the silence, the way my mother's hand had hovered just a little too long over mine. It all kept echoing. She leaned in. Are you ready to look? I nodded. I had already peeked at it again on the train ride over, but my hands had been shaking too much to focus. Now, with Riley sitting across from me, I opened the folder with deliberate care. The document was longer than I remembered. Not just a simple signature page, but a full set of clauses and attachments. As I read, the pit in my stomach tightened. This wasn't just a waiver. There was a temporary power of attorney clause buried halfway through. If signed, it would grant my parents full authority over any future decisions related to the trust. There was also a schedule of asset transfers that would begin immediately after my signature was filed. Property titles, financial accounts, business shares, all of it laid out like a plan already in motion. Riley leaned over, reading with me. Wait, look at this section. It says once the new trust is formed, it cannot be reversed without the unanimous consent of all listed beneficiaries. I traced my finger under the line. The new beneficiaries were my parents, and Josh. Not me. I sat back in my chair, the document resting on my lap. My mouth felt dry. My grandmother had trusted me. I was the named heir, but they had written me out of everything with the stroke of a pen, assuming I would hand them the permission to do it. They needed my name. That was the catch. Riley was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded note. You remember this? It was a handwritten letter. Old, faded at the corners. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Grandma Margaret. I read the line Riley pointed to. If things ever feel confusing, go to Leonard Hale. He has what you need. I had almost forgotten. My grandmother had sent me that letter a few weeks before she passed. At the time, I thought it was just sentimental, but now it felt like a trail of breadcrumbs. I think she knew, I said quietly. I think she saw this coming. Riley nodded. She always paid attention, even when no one else did. I closed the folder and looked out over the water. The lake shimmered faintly in the morning light. People were walking by, wrapped in scarves and moving slowly, like they had nowhere urgent to be. I had been steady for so long, so dependable, always fixing, never questioning. But now I saw it clearly. They had not asked me. They had assumed me, assumed I would stay quiet, assumed I would protect them again. But this time the cost was too high. I stood up, folder in hand. Riley followed me out to the sidewalk. "We need to call him," I said. "Leonard Hale?" I nodded. If there is more to this trust, I need to see it. I need to know exactly what my grandmother left behind. And for the first time in a long while, I felt not just anger, but something else rising in me. Determination. The next day, I boarded the early morning train to Boston with the folder in my bag and a weight on my shoulders I could no longer ignore. The city passed by in a blur through the window as I sat alone, going over everything again and again. Riley had offered to come, but I needed to do this part myself. Something told me my grandmother would have wanted that. The law office of Leonard Hale was in an old red brick building across from the park, the kind of place that looked like it had been there forever. I arrived 10 minutes early, nerves coiled tightly in my chest. The receptionist was kind, professional. She offered me water, then guided me down a quiet hallway lined with framed legal degrees and shelves of heavy books. Mr. Hale greeted me with a firm handshake and a kind smile. He was older, in his early 60s, I guessed, with silver hair and a quiet way of speaking that felt oddly calming. "You must be Victoria," he said. "Margaret spoke of you often." Hearing her name spoken like that made my throat tighten. I nodded, unable to say much at first. He gestured for me to sit, then opened a drawer and placed a thick envelope and a small USB drive on the table between us. "Your grandmother left these in my care with very specific instructions. She said if you ever came asking about the trust, I was to give them only to you, no one else." I reached for the envelope but paused. "What is on the drive?" He gave a small smile. "A message. She recorded it herself. I think you should see it before we go any further." He turned the monitor on, plugged the USB into a small device, and pressed play. The screen flickered, then filled with an image that stopped my heart. It was her! Margaret Ellis, seated in her favorite blue armchair, her silver hair neatly pulled back, her eyes sharp and clear even in the soft light of the recording. She looked older than I remembered, but no less powerful. "If you are watching this, Victoria, then it means what I feared has come to pass," she began. I leaned forward, holding my breath. "You have always been the one who showed up, the one who never asked for anything. And I saw that. I saw the way they leaned on you, sometimes unfairly, sometimes without even realizing. That is why I did what I did." She spoke of the trust, how it was structured, how she had designed it with protections built in. "There is a clause," she said, "one most of them never knew about. If at any point someone tries to force you to relinquish your rights to the trust, or manipulates you into signing anything under false pretenses, the entire trust is voided, and the assets will be redirected to the charities I named, every single dollar." I felt my heart beating hard in my chest. "Victoria, you are the only one I trusted to protect what I built, not because of your career or your success, but because you care. Not just about people, about doing the right thing." The screen faded to black. I sat in silence for a moment, the room so quiet I could hear the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. Mr. Hale handed me the envelope. Inside were the original documents, complete with her signature and a notarized amendment confirming the clause she had described. I could feel it now, not just the betrayal of what my parents had tried to do, but the strength of what my grandmother had left behind. She had not just passed on money. She had passed on her intention, her voice, her trust in me. I closed the envelope gently and looked up at Mr. Hale. "Can I have a copy of that video?" "Of course," he said, sliding a second USB drive across the table. "And if you wish to act on this clause, I can initiate the legal protections today." "Not yet," I said, "but soon." Because first, I had a few things to say, and this time they would be hearing from me. I spent the next 2 days preparing. It was not just about logistics. It was about taking control of the story. I cleaned my apartment until the surfaces sparkled, rearranged the living room to face a bare wall where I would project the video, and tested the USB drive a dozen times. I rehearsed what I would say, then decided I would let the video speak for me. I sent the message out the morning before, short and simple. I have thought it over. I would like to invite everyone to my apartment tomorrow at 5. I believe we can resolve things peacefully. My mother replied within minutes. I knew you would come around. I am glad we can finally put this behind us. What she did not know was that the version of me she expected no longer existed. At exactly 5 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to my mother first. She wore a beige dress, understated jewelry, and a smile too practiced to be genuine. My father followed, still in his office attire, red tie slightly loosened. Josh came in last, hands in his pockets, avoiding my eyes. Thank you all for coming, I said, motioning them into the living room. I have something to share before we talk about anything else. They sat where I had arranged the chairs, each of them expectant in their own way. My mother crossed her legs and looked at the blank wall, her posture that of someone expecting to receive praise. My father sat stiffly as though preparing for negotiation. Josh scrolled on his phone until I asked him politely to put it away. Then I turned off the lights and started the video. The wall lit up with the image of my grandmother, seated in her favorite chair. For a moment, no one said a word. Her voice filled the room. If you are watching this, Victoria has refused to sign anything you brought her. My mother shifted, her smile slipping. I have created a trust with safeguards you likely overlooked. If anyone attempts to pressure Victoria into forfeiting her rights, all assets will be rerouted to charitable organizations I have selected. My wishes are final, and they are legal. My father leaned forward, blinking at the screen. Josh stared, his phone forgotten in his lap. Victoria, my grandmother continued, you have always been the one who acted out of love, not obligation. I trust you. I believe in you. The screen faded to black. I turned the lights back on and stepped forward. What you brought to me was not a formality. It was a carefully planned deception. And now I know exactly how far you were willing to go. My mother's voice trembled. This is not fair. That was never meant for everyone to see. And yet here we are, I said calmly. She stood. You are making this worse than it is. You do not even need the money. It is not about the money, I said. It is about the truth and trust and the fact that you tried to take something from me that was never yours to begin with. My father spoke next, his tone measured. Victoria, we can figure this out. You do not have to make it public. Just sign, and we will manage things the way they were intended. You mean the way you intended, I said. I have the original documents. I have a copy of the video, and I have legal counsel ready to activate the clause if you try this again. Josh looked like he wanted to say something, but he stayed quiet. I continued, I will not sign anything. Not now, not ever. I am not your solution. I am not your shortcut. My mother clutched her purse, her knuckles pale. You will regret this. One day you will need us. Maybe, I said, but I would rather struggle on my own than surrender everything I am just to keep the peace. I walked over to the table and placed a printed copy of the trust clause in the center. If any one of you tries again, the trust becomes void and every asset will go to charity. My father stood slowly. You are serious. Deadly, I replied. I opened the door. The evening light spilled in from the hallway. You can go now. They left in silence. Not one of them looked back. As the door closed, I turned to the empty room and sat down on the couch. I could still hear my grandmother's voice in my mind, not just what she said, but what she meant. She had trusted me to stand my ground. And now it was time to take the next step. I chose a quiet cafe on the far edge of the city, one of those places no one goes to unless they know it exists. A small neighborhood spot with peeling wood chairs, good coffee, and just enough distance from home to make it feel like neutral ground. My father arrived 10 minutes late. He was wearing the same navy coat I had seen him wear at every company meeting growing up. It used to make him look like a man in charge. Today, it looked a size too big. Sorry about the delay, he said, slipping into the seat across from me. Traffic was a mess. I gave a polite nod but did not respond. I was not here to talk about traffic. He looked around the cafe, then back at me. You look well. I am glad you reached out. I reached into my bag and placed a thick envelope on the table between us. I did not come to reconnect, I said. I came to be clear. He hesitated, then picked up the envelope. His fingers trembled just slightly as he opened it and began flipping through the pages. Inside were copies of credit card statements, loan documents, and transcripts. Documents my grandmother had gathered. Records of accounts opened in my name during my college years. Years I thought I was just struggling financially because life was hard. Turns out some of those struggles had names on them. My parents. These are old, he said quietly. Some of this is just family logistics. You know how things get blurred sometimes. I kept my eyes on him. When I was 21, I worked 3 jobs to pay off a credit card that I never applied for. Do you remember that? You told me it was mine, that I must have forgotten using it. He said nothing. I continued. And when Mom said Josh had been in a car accident and needed emergency surgery, you asked me for $8,000. 2 hours later, that money went to a used car dealership in Florida. For her new SUV. Where did you get this? He asked. His voice was low now, defensive. From Grandma, I said. She documented everything, audio recordings too. He opened one of the transcripts and read the first few lines, then set it down like it was hot. What do you want, Victoria? I leaned back in my chair. Not money, not another apology. Just this. I will not be manipulated again. I will not be your solution. You and Mom are done using my name, my income, or my goodwill to fix your messes. He blinked at me. And if we do not agree? Then I go to the authorities. I go to the IRS. I go to every agency I have to. You have no idea how much I am prepared to lose if it means finally being free of this. He looked like he might argue, but the weight of the evidence sat between us like a boulder. He knew there was no moving it. I took a breath. But I will offer you one thing, one last gesture. I slid a second envelope across the table. Inside are contact details for financial counseling services and a treatment program. One of them specializes in gambling addiction. Another helps couples navigate financial codependency. If you want a real reset, I will pay for that. Quietly. No strings. He stared at the envelope but did not reach for it. You think I need treatment? I think you need honesty, I said. And this is the only help I am willing to give now. Not money, not protection. Just the chance to do better if you actually want to. The silence between us stretched. He finally leaned back, his expression softer. Maybe more tired than anything else. Your grandmother really thought you would stand up to us. She did, I said, and I am finally living up to that trust. He nodded slowly. What about the company? We will talk about that next, I said. Because what they had done with my name was one thing. What they had done with the family business was something else entirely. The conference room at Mr. Hale's office was larger than I expected. Long glass table, leather chairs, windows that framed the morning sky like a painting. Everything about the space felt calm, deliberate. A room designed for truth, not emotion. I arrived early, carrying both folders and resolve. Mr. Hale was already there, setting up the projector. He greeted me with the same quiet professionalism he always did. Everything is prepared, he said. The documents are printed and marked, and the video is ready. I nodded. No small talk today, no pleasantries. I took my seat at the head of the table and waited. At exactly 9 o'clock, the door opened. My mother walked in first, wearing a charcoal blazer and polished heels. My father followed, carrying a black briefcase, eyes sharp but tired. Josh trailed behind them, silent and unsure. They looked like a team ready for a negotiation, but I was not here to negotiate. Thank you for coming, I said. Please, have a seat. They did. Mr. Hale stood. As requested by Margaret Ellis, this is the final estate meeting. There is one last recording, and the remaining terms of the trust and business assets will be disclosed. He dimmed the lights and pressed play. The screen flickered, then lit with the image of my grandmother. This time she wore a more serious expression. Her voice was clear and direct. If you are watching this, it means the family has attempted to gain control of what was never theirs to claim. Ellen, Thomas, I know what you have done. I have reviewed the unreported withdrawals, the use of business accounts for personal expenses, the falsified invoices. I kept records, and I shared them. My mother shifted in her seat. My father stared at the screen, unmoving. The company my husband and I built was not meant to be a family ATM. It was built on integrity. That is why I am transferring full ownership of the business to Victoria. She is the only one who has not misused it. She is the only one I trust. The screen went black. Silence followed. I stood, placing a new folder on the table. Inside are the official documents. The company shares have been legally transferred. I am now the sole owner of Ellis Prescott and Company. You cannot be serious, my mother said, her voice rising. I am. I have filed the ownership change with the state. These are notarized, I said, tapping the top page. My father leaned forward. I am still acting CEO. You cannot just take that away. I pulled out another document. Here is your resignation letter. If you do not sign it now, I will submit all financial records to the SEC. Every misused dollar, every offshore payment, every false report. He looked at me stunned. You would destroy your own family? You already did that, I said. I am just cleaning up what is left. He glanced at my mother. She looked frozen. He picked up the pen and signed. Thank you, I said. I gathered the papers and set them in a neat pile. Starting today, the company will undergo a full independent audit. All discretionary accounts are suspended. Personal expenses will no longer be reimbursed. The corporate apartment will be reclaimed. New ethics policies will be reviewed and voted on by the new board. Josh finally spoke. Are we really just letting this happen? I looked at him. It already happened. You just did not see it coming. Mr. Hale gathered the documents and nodded toward me. You may proceed as you see fit. I stood, meeting adjourned. They filed out one by one. My father last, pausing at the door. He looked back at me, not with anger, but with something that looked a lot like defeat. And then he walked away. I stayed behind for a few more minutes, the weight of everything finally landing. I had taken the company. I had taken back my name. But there was still something more I needed to do, something my grandmother had always dreamed of, something that would change the story for more than just me. The first week in the new office felt surreal. The desk was the same. The building was the same. But everything else had changed. I did not replace much, just one thing. The large photograph that had once hung behind the CEO's chair was gone. In its place, I hung one of my grandmother's paintings, a forest trail lit by late afternoon sun. She had painted it when I was a teenager and told me then that light always finds a way through, even in the darkest trees. That felt like the right message to carry forward. The company needed more than new leadership. It needed a new direction, a new set of values. I started by calling a full staff meeting. I kept it simple. No more blurred lines, no more backdoor deals. We move forward with transparency and purpose. If you are with me, great. If not, I understand. Some people left, most stayed. We restructured departments, set clearer guidelines, introduced independent oversight, and I made a quiet but firm decision to donate 20% of the company's annual profits to something that mattered. The Margaret Ellis Foundation was born 3 months later. I named it not just for her memory, but for her mission. A nonprofit dedicated to helping people recover from financial manipulation within their families. We offered counseling, legal guidance, and financial literacy workshops for young adults just starting out and for older adults trying to break free. People often think abuse only looks like bruises or shouting, but sometimes it looks like guilt, like being pressured into loans, like co-signing for debts that never belonged to you, like being told over and over that you owe your family everything. My grandmother knew that. She lived it. She fought it quietly her whole life. I decided we would fight it loudly. Riley joined me as a volunteer coordinator. We started holding seminars in libraries and community centers. Our first event was in a high school gym where 20 students showed up and stayed after to ask questions that told me we were doing something important. The foundation grew faster than I expected. Donations came in from former clients who had once been in my shoes. Volunteers signed up from across the state. Survivors emailed us to say thank you. One even said, "I thought I was alone. I did not know there was a name for what my family did to me." That made everything worth it. At night, I would walk past the painting in my office, look at that trail through the trees, and feel something new. Not just pride. Peace. But that peace was tested one more time, because 2 weeks after the foundation opened its doors, I received another message. This time it was from my mother. The message came late on a Thursday. A simple text from my mother. "Your father just got out of the hospital. We need to talk." No pleasantries, no apology, just the familiar pull of obligation disguised as urgency. I waited a few hours before replying. Friday, 3 o'clock, my office. They arrived on time. My mother looked polished as always, though her eyes seemed tired in a way I had not seen before. My father moved slower than usual, his posture bent slightly. Illness had taken something from him, but it was hard to tell if it had given anything back. We sat in the small conference room beside my office. It was quiet, no projector, no drama, just the three of us and 2 envelopes sitting on the table. "I am not here to reopen the past," I said, "and I am not here to argue." My mother looked at me carefully. "Then what are you here for?" "To be clear," I said. I slid the envelopes toward them. Inside are lists of resources, financial counselors, a treatment program for compulsive spending, another one for family codependency. These are good people. I have already spoken to them. She did not open the envelope. "We are not asking for money," she said. "We just wanted to talk, to understand." I nodded. "I believe you mean that, but I also know how patterns work." My father stayed quiet until now. His voice was softer than I remembered. "Do you think we are terrible people?" I looked at them both. "No, I think you are people who never learned how to set boundaries, and you never taught me how to set mine, but I have learned now." They nodded slowly. There was no argument left in them, only silence. After a few more minutes, they stood. My mother gave me one last glance, then walked toward the door. My father followed. They left without asking for anything more. And for the first time, I did not feel guilty for saying no. I felt free. That weekend, I was invited to speak at a youth conference. The youth conference was held in a quiet auditorium tucked between a public library and a community college. Rows of folding chairs filled the room, and the air buzzed with quiet conversations and soft music playing from a nearby speaker. When it was my turn to speak, I walked onto the small stage and looked out at the audience. Students, volunteers, young professionals. Most of them had no idea who I was, and that made it easier. I was not here as a CEO. I was here as someone who had been through it. Someone who had lived the kind of family loyalty that drains more than it gives. I took a breath and began. "My name is Victoria. For most of my life, I was the dependable one, the one who always said yes, the one who kept everything together when no one else would. But I learned something hard and honest. Real family does not come with conditions. Love should never require silence. Respect should never depend on what you can provide." I spoke about the trust, about the lies, about the slow, painful awakening that happens when you realize the people who raised you are not always the people who protect you. I told them that choosing myself over inherited guilt was the hardest thing I had ever done. But it was also the most necessary. Afterward, a few people came up to talk. Some asked questions, others just said thank you. One young woman handed me a note that said, "I thought I was the only one." I kept that note in my wallet. That night, back in my apartment, I pulled out the last letter my grandmother had written, the one she left with Mr. Hale. It was handwritten in her careful script, folded twice, and sealed in a plain white envelope. "Dear Victoria, if the time ever comes when you must choose between keeping your family and keeping yourself, I hope you choose you. Not out of spite, but out of truth. Real family will never ask you to lose who you are." I sat with the letter for a long time. Then I folded it again, placed it in the drawer beside my bed, and turned off the light. Outside, the city was quiet, and for the first time in my life, I was too. In the story of Victoria, we witnessed more than a battle over inheritance. We saw the quiet courage it takes to stand against a lifetime of expectation. Her journey was not just about reclaiming money or power, but about reclaiming herself. Through deception, pressure, and emotional manipulation, Victoria chose truth. She chose peace, and most importantly, she chose her own worth over a legacy built on silence. Her story reminds us that real strength often looks like calm, like clarity, like finally saying no. You do not have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes the most transformative act is simply choosing yourself. If this story spoke to you, take a moment to reflect. Share your thoughts, leave a comment, or subscribe for more stories like this. Because somewhere, someone else is waiting to hear that they are not alone, and your voice could be the one that helps them begin again.